and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Aaron Porras, here with ILTV's Morning Briefing.
An IDF soldier was slightly injured in Hebron this morning in an apparent stabbing terror attack. According to the army, quote, a terrorist tried to stab a soldier near the tomb of the patriarchs and lightly wounded him. The soldier and additional forces at the scene responded with live fire, end quote. They continued to note that the suspect was neutralized, but did not comment on whether that meant dead or in custody. Pictures posted to social media, however, seem to confirm the death of the attacker. The victim is reported in stable condition and was treated at the scene before being taken to the hospital. The Tomb of the Patriarchs is often the target of terrorist violence, and this is the third week in a row that an attack has occurred in the area. In a shocking move, Jordan's King Abdullah II announced yesterday in Amman that he will not be renewing a special clause in the 1994 Israel-Jordan peace agreement, which will allow the Hashemite kingdom to annex 2 sites currently under Israeli control. The Jordanian king said that, quote, we are practicing our full sovereignty on our land, end quote, and that, quote, our priority in these regional circumstances is to protect our interests. The government didn't expand much further on their reasoning, but Amman has faced intense internal pressure for years to make the move, including a letter signed by 80 Jordanian parliament members. The relevant clause in the peace agreement leased to Israel the use of 2 areas along the Jordan-Israel border, and it would renew automatically every 25 years unless either party objects. Well, that's what Jordan is doing now, in the last year before the renewal, launching a negotiation into how the transfer will take effect. The 2 regions include the Naharaim area in the north and the Tzofar enclave in the Arava Desert in the south. Both are used by Israel for agriculture, and both will be Jordanian within a year's time. The loss of individual Israeli property and revenue will be discussed at length with the Israeli government as part of negotiations to return the land. But perhaps most unsettling about the announcement are the implications it has on Israel-Jordan diplomatic relations, as well as the dismantling of the so-called Isle of Peace, a landmark commemorating a terrible terror attack in 1997, where 7 young Israeli girls were murdered by a Jordanian soldier. The Palestinian Authority is harshly condemning Israel right now over the weekend arrests of 2 top Palestinian Authority officials. Israeli security forces arrested the Palestinian Authority's Jerusalem governor Adnan Reit and Colonel Jihad Faqih, the commander of the PA's intelligence service for the Jerusalem area. The PA released a statement calling the arrests another crime against the Palestinian leadership and our eternal capital of Jerusalem, but the 2 suspects are now in Jerusalem police custody for interrogation on charges of aiding in the abduction of a Palestinian-American citizen from Jerusalem 2 weeks ago. According to Israel's Chadashot news agency, the abducted man, supposedly a Palestinian Arab Jerusalemite with Israeli residency and American citizenship, was targeted for selling an Arab property in Jerusalem's Muslim quarter to a Jewish organization. Now, the punishment in the Palestinian Authority for selling any land to any Jew or Israeli is death, though Palestinian President Abbas has instead simply been sentencing, quote, anyone diverting, renting, or selling land to an enemy state or one of its subjects to hard labor for life. What's become of this victim specifically is unknown, however, but the United States State Department has reportedly gotten involved, saying the department, quote, works to provide all appropriate consular assistance, end quote, when a citizen is incarcerated or detained overseas. But given the current diplomatic climate between Washington and Ramallah, it's unclear what will come of this involvement. Last week, we reported the murder of Angoach Malk Muwasa, the 36-year-old mother of 3 in Netanya who was shot to death by her husband in the presence of her 3 young children. Well, over the past month alone, intra-family gun violence has taken the lives of 2 Israeli women, bringing the total to 20 Israeli women having been murdered by relatives since the start of this year. So to protest this rising violence, hundreds of Israelis took to the streets over the past week across 20 different cities in Israel, including Jerusalem, Haifa, and Tel Aviv. Protesters held a moment of silence to commemorate the women who have been victims of violence and held up signs showing the female victims as well as balloons with the words, "The Cry of Transparent Women." In Tel Aviv, protesters gathered in Dizengoff Square to demand a change in policy, and in Jerusalem, they laid down in red puddles symbolizing blood, scattering death notices in honor of the women who were murdered. One of their signs read, quote, Gilad Erdan, how do you plan to stop the next murder, end quote. One of the organizers of the protest, actress Yael Abakassis, read a list of victims over the past year, adding tearfully that over the past decade, over 160 Israeli women were murdered, and that, quote, we were unable to protect them, end quote. Several opposition leaders also attended the protests, including Zionist Union MK Yael Cohen-Paran, Meretz MKs Michal Rosen and Mossi Raz, and Joint List MK Dov Chenin. Opposition leader Tzipi Livni said, quote, the government is distributing weapons instead of dealing with the problem. It's unbearable. She also quipped that male members of the government should have attended the events. Merav Ben-Ari from the Kulanu party was the only coalition member to show up.
That's all for now. I'm Aaron Porras, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.